Hello LEGO fans, Bricks Unbound here with a new series that I'm starting on my channel. I'm gonna probably call it Building Hogwarts. So, as the name implies, I am planning on building Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Minifig-ish scale. It's gonna be bigger than the official sets. We'll see how big it actually becomes. I'm a little limited on space, so we'll have to see about that. But I am anticipating this video series being about my whole process of building it. So there'll be not necessarily regular updates. There won't be a set schedule. Won't necessarily be like every week I will be releasing a video or anything like that. But I am starting it today, which is September 1st of 2018. And of course, for Harry Potter fans, September 1st is significant because it is the day that the school year starts at Hogwarts. It's when the Hogwarts Express leaves King's Cross Station. So, what better day to start my own adventure into building Hogwarts. So my process has a few steps to it that I generally use for most of my mocks. In this case, I have a couple of extra helpful things. First being the actual Harry Potter sets themselves that LEGO came out with this year. So I can look at those and see what techniques they use, what details they included, and perhaps include some of those myself into my version of the school. But in addition to that, I of course have to plan out things by looking at official material as well, which of course the best way to do that is to watch the movies a ton of times and read the books. Unfortunately, the Hogwarts in the movies is much different in layout than the one in the books. So it is important to realize that when you are working on really any mock, is that different sources will probably have different versions of it. But mine, since the movie is the visual version of it, it's going to be based on that. Also, it's a lot easier to just look at pictures from the movie, various screenshots and things to try to figure out what the layout is. So, after I've watched the movie several times, I also looked at the LEGO Harry Potter world, or Wizarding World, I don't remember what they call it in the LEGO Dimensions game. But it's nice because in that you can actually fly your little figure around, fly your player character around the castle. To get a good look at it, I just put Harry on a broomstick and flew him all around the place to get top-down views. And again, looking at it through that version, the version in that game looks yet different from the movie and of course the books. So, while that was good for the general layout, because it seemed to be relatively similar, it didn't have all of the buildings, but it did have most of the major ones in that game. So from there, from the movies, I did sketch out a layout for it. So I used this notebook for pretty much all my mocks. It's really getting filled up. So this is the treasure trove of all the Bricks Unbound mocks, plans for the future, all of that stuff. But we'll take a look here at the Harry Potter one first. So the general layout of Hogwarts Castle, not proportional. But here is kind of the first version of it. And even in the movies themselves, the layout of the castle does change, unfortunately. I know one big thing that always changes is where Hagrid's hut is. Because in the first few movies, it's more in general this vicinity with Forbidden Forest back here. And then once you get to movie 3, it moves over to about here with Forbidden Forest back here. And the Mothman Mill itself also moves. It's originally inside this wall complex over at the far edge of the school, and then it moves, at least, yeah, it moves over. I don't even know if it's here, actually. It might even be on the other side of this clock tower courtyard. So stuff moves a lot in the films. So that actually, it can be annoying because then you don't have your official way to look at it, but also it's kind of freeing because if you decide, you know what, let's just put this over here because that's where it was in this one piece of source material. It's kind of nice because it gives you a little bit more flexibility. But for reference here, you probably can't read my handwriting, it's pretty terrible. So this is the entrance courtyard, Great Hall. The viaduct bridge that connects the entrance courtyard to this whole building structure over here, building complex over here. And then, of course, in some of the later movies, they added another bridge that comes straight off the entrance courtyard, which I believe is supposed to lead off to like Hogsmeade and stuff, but it's where the main attack by Voldemort's army, of course, happens for Battle of Hogwarts. So again, changes between movies. But yeah, this is the general idea of what it looks like. Grand Staircase Tower. I did label quite a bit of stuff in here. I don't know if this is actually where the Hufflepuff common room is underneath this tower, but I think that's probably where I'm going to put it, because it is in the basement and it's close to the kitchens, and the kitchens, of course, are directly underneath the Great Hall. The kitchens aren't in the movies, but they are in the books, so I will be adding several details from the books. Anyway, Grand Staircase Tower we've got, and I have looked up all the names for all of these things. I didn't sketch them all in though, so I apologize. I can't remember the name of this. I think it's just called the Quad, this building with the 4 towers. And of course there's lots of little bridges that go across, and I noted here, this gap is probably too big between these. I was just doing a quick sketch here, not exact measurements. And then Gryffindor Tower, at least in the films, is officially this tower here. Divination Tower, I believe, is the one over here, with the hospital wing being up here. Courtyard Tower, which then leads out across that covered wooden bridge, and down to Hagrid's hut, the Whopping Willow, all of that in later films. I won't go through this whole thing, I just wanted to give you a general idea of what it kind of looks like. I'm going to put most of the classrooms in this large building here. I think that will work the best. It's a nice, relatively straight-walled, rectangular building, so it'll be easier to fit classrooms in there than, say, a bunch of the towers and other various smaller buildings with just the hallways and things. So everything isn't necessarily going to be in the correct spot. For instance, I'm putting Ravenclaw Tower. There's this really big tower that comes up out of the building over here, and I'm not sure what that is, but it seems like a great spot for Ravenclaw Tower because I'm planning on putting the library right underneath it. And it's very possible this sketch makes no sense to a lot of people watching, because they're having trouble picturing what the castle actually looks like in their head. Again, that's why I did the various screenshots and things, because I was having trouble with it too. And then there are a couple other small sketches that I did down here to see if I could close things in a little bit better, because this version really spreads out and would take up a ton of space, especially at minifig scale. So I'm not entirely sure which version I'm going to use yet. I think some of these are just ones I created myself by kind of wrapping this outer wall here closer into the castle. Some of them are based more on Lego Dimensions, things like that. But that's just kind of how my general process works, is I try to sketch out my first idea for what it's going to be, which for most of my mocks ends up being something ridiculously huge compared to the final product, but I can simplify the design, or shrink it, I guess, not necessarily simplify it, as I work on the project. And I, in some cases, will, for instance, my Ultra Agent's headquarters, the first time I build it, it will be much larger than the final version of it, because I shrunk that one from a 48 by 48 base plate down to 32 to 32. So I could see something very similar happening to the Harry Potter one. And then I just kind of make notes on main things I want to include. I actually have a full list of this on my computer, but unfortunately that computer stopped working. So I just am looking at the general things I had written down here. So major sections of Hogwarts. I've got things that are underground areas, so Chamber of Secrets in the dungeons where we've got potions, Slytherin Common Room, Hufflepuff Common Room, and the kitchens are all underground. On the grounds there's the Whopping Willow, of course there'd also be Hagrid's hut, Quidditch pitch, all of that. So you can Quidditch pitch, I don't know where I'm going to put it. I do want to include it, but again it takes up a lot of space that I don't have, and in the movies it also has several different locations. Most of the time it's somewhere generally on this side of the castle. But in the books, in first movies and stuff, it mentions Hagrid seeing it from his hut, which in those movies and books is over here somewhere, which you wouldn't be able to see it over there. So again, got to do some rearranging and ideas. So layout proportions, this is of course going to be a big question. So originally I take notes of the date too that I was thinking this, so that way I can go back to reference it. It says of July 3rd. Had this idea in my head for a while. I was planning on just kind of doubling the size of the official sets and then making everything else to scale. And honestly, even if I do that, it's going to make this pretty big, because this Great Hall here sits on a 32 long by 16 wide. So just if I copy this exactly double the size, it's going to be a 64 long, 32 wide, just for the Great Hall entrance. Probably not entrance courtyard, because this one is super underscaled. So that would be pretty huge just for this, and then the rest of the castle would just be enormous and probably wouldn't even fit in my entire Lego room. But again, I'm going to play around with it. I'll probably build it at about that scale to start with for a couple of the buildings, and look at it and be like, oh man, that's way too huge. When I set it here, it takes up the whole table, so let's shrink it down. So that could very well happen. But next I tried to sketch out kind of what some of the buildings look like. So this is obviously, no, not obviously, my drawing is pretty terrible. But these are the bell towers that are at, let's see, this far end. It's these two buildings here of the castle, so a long ways away from the iconic shot. In fact, those weren't even included. This entire building that I'm making, the classroom building, wasn't even included in the micro scale Hogwarts they released actually today on September 1st, 2018. Anyway, it's based on those from the LEGO Dimensions game. So basically what I did is I had my little Harry fly up to the outside of these two structures, or this big structure in LEGO Dimensions, and I just looked at it and sketched it down, and then looked at it in the movie version, and it looks completely different. The general shaping is right, but the windows aren't necessarily windows here, because this is a bell tower. It's just got a lot of opening, lots of arches, which looks a lot more interesting than just a couple windows on a big blank wall. But again, this is what I looked at from the Dimensions game, so I wanted to sketch that, try to get general proportions, which are still pretty close. Like I said, the window placement and everything is a little bit off in that game. But this is how my brain works. I just make sketches of various things and then decide, you know, that's good. It's a good way to reference things. And then here is that same building seen from the other side. So the greenhouses and stuff would be like kind of down in front and wrap around. But here's all the side. So this is part of the reason why I thought this would make a good classroom building, because there's plenty of windows here. There's a couple of levels to it, so you could fit a lot of details inside it. And then here's that tower from the other side, again, not looking at like it does in the movie. And I believe that's as far as I got with the sketches, because the rest of it is a little bit easier to find the pictures of, to just kind of mess around. And I hated to sketch out the entire castle before I figured out what my proportions were going to be. And then after that, of course, is just hitting the bricks and deciding, again, other ways on what my proportions would be besides looking at the book. So one thing I wanted to include, of course, is the bridge. So I did mock up a very basic version of it, probably much smaller than it was. And to decide the proportions on this, I wanted to make sure that a Hogwarts carriage could fit down it, so then it could get up and park in the entrance courtyard to drop the people off when they get to Hogwarts, because of course they only use the boats in the first year, and they use the carriages for the rest of them. So the carriage, I decided, this is Grindelwald's carriage, of course, from the Grindelwald's Escape set that released this year. But it actually looks quite a bit like the Hogwarts carriages in their closed-up versions that are used in some of the books and movies. So I wanted this to be able to fit down the bridge, but I didn't want the bridge, of course, to be too enormous. So it just barely fits there, but it does fit. It can roll down it. So I was like, good, that is how wide the bridge is going to be. And then I just look at pictures comparing, you know, that show the bridge coming to the entrance courtyard, so I can be like, oh, what's roughly twice as wide or 3 times as wide or whatever to this, and then the Great Hall will sit on that. The Great Hall is a little walkway that goes around the outside. So I just look at all of these pictures and try to come up with the general plan. So I'm messing around with parts just to get the size of a few things here, and it looks alright. Again, it's not the final version, because of course the supports would be solid going all the way across, and it's like 3 times this height. And then I went through, organized my parts. So we'll just do a very quick view down here. So I got a box. I just have a ton of tan parts, and I ordered a bunch of them just so I could mess around. Like, this is without even having a necessarily full plan, but so I can mess with different archways and angles and slopes in here. Then plates in this one, as you can see. It's also got some jumpers in there. This one has some more modified bricks and curved things, door frames, all that. I'm using this color and probably the dark tan to try to get a little bit of more interest to the walls than just being straight regular tan all the way around. This one just has a bunch of kind of interesting parts that I had in tans, like flags and ice cream cone pieces, these teeth things. You know, it's things I can potentially just mess with, use for some detail. I just have small amounts of each one in here, so I can figure out what works and then order more if I need to. These things, which are, you know, big drill-looking pieces, but they could be interesting little turrets or something. So pretty happy with just the variety of parts I get to mess with. I have a bunch of these large panels as well, and those are just so I can quickly build up sides of structures and see what it looks like in the end. And here's some just the other dark tan pieces I had. And then the last one here, it's got a bunch of these new window pieces in it. I found some sellers that had parted out a bunch of copies of the official Great Hall set, so I'd have tons of those windows to play around with. Some chairs, some of these nice tower top pieces. Just a lot of parts just to mess with, just to see what I can make to come up with my designs for various things. So that'll actually do it for this video. That takes you through my general thought process. So for my other mocks, I tended to design at least a little bit of in Lego Digital Designer as well. But as I mentioned, my computer doesn't work anymore, and the one I'm currently using is like a 20-year-old computer, so it can't even download Lego Digital Designer, or at least it can't run it. It can download it, I guess. So that stuff, my process is not here this time around, so I am using, which might make this slightly more expensive because I am just having to mess around with parts to figure out what I want it to look like. So it's a little bit more hands-on, like actually physically manipulating the bricks this time around than some of my other creations. But that is fun because I can really just do whatever I want with the scale that way, and I can see what it looks like in person. Whereas on Lego Digital Designer, while it looks pretty good, it's just not quite the same as seeing the actual product built in front of you to decide how you want to do it. Lego Digital Designer can be a little bit quicker though. You don't have to wait for orders to come in or anything like that. But that was an option this time, so I relied even more heavily than usual on doing sketches of the items, of the buildings, the structures, of the vehicles, of everything involved in it. Doing sketches of it and then actually building it out in bricks, changing the size, the scale, depending on how I wanted to do it. And then I'm just sticking little minifigures on various builds to see, do they look okay in proportion to what's going on there. And I think this bridge works. You can walk, what, 3 or 4 wide across the bridge at a time. So I hope you enjoyed this first, I guess, kind of reveal and planning stage of the castle. It's not completely planned out because I don't know for sure how big things are going to be, but that's all part of the fun. My next video will probably be looking at various smaller designs that I've done, either that or taking a first look at the Great Hall that I've been working on. I have worked on a little bit, still got quite a ways to go, but maybe it'll either be an update on the Great Hall or a look at some of the smaller designs for the castle, some various ideas I have for building windows or archways or doorways or things like that. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll come back for the next video. Thank you.